Hello and welcome everybody to PAVE Europe's 25th virtual panel on unlocking the potential, autonomous vehicles in goods transportation and logistics. My name is Nicola Hare, Project and Engagement Manager at the Partners for Automated Vehicle Education Europe, and I'm very excited for what promises to be a very insightful conversation with really good panelists, though I may be biased. So this panel follows the release of PAVE Europe's latest white paper, The Case for Autonomous Vehicles in Goods Transportation and Logistics, which highlights how autonomous vehicles are transforming the logistics industry by addressing key challenges like driver shortages and improving operational efficiency. It also offers insights into the business benefits of integrating AVs into goods, transportations, and logistics. The paper is available for download now, and you can do that via the QR code on your screen. So, how are autonomous vehicles being integrated into different stages of logistics, whether that's off-road movement to last mile delivery and long-haul transport? What role can AVs play in addressing pressing industry challenges such as labor shortages and operational inefficiencies? And what are the real-world applications of AV technologies that are already in place, and what business cases demonstrate their value? Exploring some of these questions with me today are Dr. Arwed Schmidt, Karla Jakeman, Björn Lindner, and Oliver Howes. Together, we'll deep dive into the integration of AVs in Europe's infrastructure, the evolving regulatory landscape, the challenges of scaling autonomous technology, and the ways in which AVs are addressing industry-wide concerns. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome our panelists to introduce themselves. So I have Bjorn on my screen first. So if I could let you introduce yourselves, that'd be great.
Of course. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Here joining from Switzerland. I'm Björn Lindner, heading the innovation department of the company Planzer. Planzer is the largest family-owned logistic company in Switzerland. So we are doing everything our customer wants in the logistic area from B2B to B2C. And finally, we are piloting currently a level 4 vehicle in the city of Bern for goods delivery. And I'm happy to share some insights and some learnings today.
Thank you. I have Karla next.
Hi, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Karla Jakeman. I'm the Director of Grant Funding and Head of Automation in Transport at TRL. I'm here in the UK. TRL, if you don't know us, we invented the zebra crossing. That's our claim to fame. And also we are the home of the Smart Mobility Living Lab in London, which is 24 kilometres of real test track in a real life environment around very busy streets in London. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Karla. Oliver?
Hello, thank you, Nicola, and good afternoon, everyone else. My name's Oliver Howes, and I lead on international regulations here at OXA, focusing on primarily UN regulation, EU regulation, and US as well. So OXA, if those who don't know, is an autonomous vehicle software company headquartered in Oxford in England. And we develop the software to replace the human driver, taking all the roles from perceiving the environment and planning the future motion of the vehicle.
Thank you, Oliver. Arwed?
Oh, thanks a lot, Nicola, for all this here. I'm Arwed Schmidt, Managing Director, EasyMile GmbH. EasyMile is a company 10 years old, and we have done many deployments in the past 10 years across the globe, both on open roads and on confined areas. So I look very much forward to this discussion today.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So I think we should just get right into it. So again, thank you for being here. And the paper presents, the kind of potential for AVs in goods transportation and logistics, like I've said, but sometimes the gap between potential, if you like, and reality sometimes lies in a few barriers. So in your view, what is the most underestimated factor that is holding back large-scale AV adoption in logistics? And why do you believe that this challenge is not being discussed enough? I'll start with Oliver, if I may. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. Could you just briefly repeat the question for me?
Yeah, sure. In your view, what is the most underestimated factor that's holding back large-scale AV adoption in logistics? And why do you believe that this challenge is not being discussed enough?
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to address that. I think one of the things that can really be worked on across industry and government is the forming strategic partnerships. So the collaboration between OEMs and ADS developers and logistics providers coming together to really tackle these challenges that we face. That really is true for the off-highway and on-highway environment. The challenges are slightly different in both different environments. From a regulatory perspective, which is where I do lots of my work, the off-highway environment is already quite well supported by sort of regulation and standards. In the UK, for example, you have the Health and Safety at Work Act, and you have the Machinery Directive, which really provides the sort of foundational requirements for deploying these sort of vehicles in an off-highway environment. And on the on-highway environment, we have a lot of development at the moment going on with UN regulations, which will set a framework for Europe and across the world, really. And there's huge challenges there, and how we work. We as an ADS developer work with the vehicle manufacturers and the eventual operators of these services to understand how we get these sort of systems approved, how we develop them in compliance with regulation, and how we go to deploy these vehicles safely and operate them safely. Because it's not just about ensuring they meet the requirements from day one, it's ensuring they continue to meet these requirements when they're in operation. They remain safe when they're in operation as well. So I think that's one of the main things for me is bringing organizations together to sort of tackle those challenges together.
Yeah, I like that. Collaboration is key, as I think I always say now. Bjorn, same question to you, please.
Collaboration is key. I can really can say the same thing. We are as a let's say a future customer of all this kind of L4 vehicles in the logistic area. We face at the moment several things where maybe it's hard for others to just start. First thing is the availability, of course, of vehicles. So I think this is so far clear. And the other thing, it's for us not a standalone solution. So whenever you have a vehicle now, you can just purchase the vehicle. You have a driver with a license, and then you can start from day one. To operate with L4 vehicles in the future, it needs to be embedded fully. Means in the processes, means in the customer experience flow, all these things. And this is quite complex. It has a huge potential in our eyes, but on the other hand, it needs to be well prepared. And I think this needs some education, it needs some preparation. And therefore, I can say it's really good to start at a certain point to get all this experience. The other thing, what we face is also that regarding the business case, there are some blind spots still. So it's not yet clear at the end what does it means to operate a fleet of L4 vehicles. And therefore, I think some of our competitors, they are still a little bit in a waiting position to get more informations about that. But overall, I must say, time is there, so it's a good momentum to start. So, and therefore, it only helps, and I can really say cooperation is key. So it's the first time that we at Planzer, we are really talking directly with tech providers, with software engineers, with T1 companies and OEMs, and I think that's a good sign. And that I think prepares the whole thing for a large scale operation later. Yeah.
Amazing. Arwed?
I would look back a couple of decades, and all what we've got is basically, when you look into the infrastructure, is that the hardware requested a specific stability. For instance, when you look at from the coaches to the cars, what was that for necessity then to make a street differently? When you look into the telecommunication topic for the last 30, 40 years for us, it's all requirements driven. Autonomous driving was seen as the holy grail and was understood as a technology, and this just has to be developed and then you just can embed it. The opposite is true. It is a novel way of thinking. Yes, it comes with many opportunities and options, but it's a novel way of thinking, like a new hardware thinking for the laying transportation system. So the laying transportation system is basically that, what, including regulation, what is there, what cannot be changed quickly. We can speak about a real lab. We can speak about temporary changes, but basically this is, I don't want to say written in stone, but it's there. And just asking now the autonomous driving to overtake and just to embed doesn't work. And this was a misunderstanding in the last 10 years, by the way. And now when we speak into the next 10 years, what has to be done to scale, it just has to be profitable. And it has to make sense from what you're doing for both sides. So the logics of just doing a pilot and see how far you get may not be repeated, because this was what makes it too slow. And this was, you can compare it to a puzzle piece, and you always try to put the puzzle piece in the puzzle and it just doesn't match. So you have to have, and you can do that, and we do that successfully. You have to think the puzzle as a whole, understand the interfaces, ODD matching, so to speak, and then putting the puzzle at the right position, that it is a sustainable project, so to speak, and you don't have to just take it out again after 2 years because there is no funding, or and so on and so forth. So the logics, when you speak about scaling, from what we have seen in the past 10 years, you won't be able to scale that in the next 10 years. You have to rethink how autonomous driving has to be embedded and has to create its own system, as we have seen it in the transportation domain in the last 150 years, whenever a new technology was coming and embedded in the existing frame.
Amazing. Thank you, Arwed. Karla, the same question to you. And actually, if I may be cheeky and just add in, how do you, if it is about collaboration as well, how do you think industry players can work together to kind of overcome some of the barriers? Just because TRL is a partner in so many projects in the UK. So I'm just curious to add another layer to the question, if I may.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. I think, well, I think for me, that the underestimated factor really, on a more practical level, is actually, it's not even the last mile for automation, it's the last few meters. And I think that that's a massive challenge that we have, especially in the UK, with regards to that changeover from a public road onto a private driveway or a part of private property, especially for some of these local deliverers, and how we get around that, and going back to what Ollie was saying with regards to regulation and safety, and doing all of that in the best way possible. And in answering the second part to that question, yeah, TRL, we do work with all different types of organizations, which we pride ourselves on, because that you need all of those different pieces to come together to get those projects. And we facilitate as much as possible when it comes to enabling people to test, for example, at Smart Mobility Living Lab. So we will work with organizations to help them realize their innovations and support wherever possible, because you need enablers, independent enablers, really, like TRL, to help build some of those projects and help test them. And as the nature of innovation is, sometimes things don't work out. So what can we learn from those things? And how can we analyze those results to take things to the next level? And so we work with a whole variety of different partners to try and realize some of those experiences and learning opportunities, for sure.
Thank you. And yes, I would encourage using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen should you have any questions for the panelists, and we'll try and get through some of those at the end. Another question for Björn specifically. So looking ahead, 5 to 10 years, what do you believe a realistic AV-enabled supply chain will look like? And, what concrete steps should businesses be taking today to ensure that they are prepared for this transformation?
Tough question. At least we are ambitious at Planzer. So, but we also realize that it's hard to plan. But we think if everything goes smooth, at least in Switzerland, we can see in 3 to 4 years a larger scaled fleet. And then you must understand large-scale fleet in Switzerland is maybe still small compared to other countries, but that this run in operations. But as I said, it's there are many puzzle pieces that needs to fit together at the end. We prepare ourselves, and I think this is the message I want to give. I think at least we all need to start to prepare ourselves to have at the end the right questions as an organization, as a transportation company, because everything what we discussed up to now is true. So there are still some beliefs or some, let's say, unanswered questions, and we need to find out who can answer this and with whom we can cooperate. And I think again that's really the chance to at least have the right people at the table and start educate themselves. And also I think another point we should not underestimate is it's a huge change also for people inside the companies, means for employees, and also for the, of course, other people outside of the company. If you talk about cities, about other companies that need to also be involved, you need already to start to talk about what you are planning, what does it means to take also, let's say, realize that there are some that people maybe are afraid, that they see many risks in all these things, and it's a good chance now to really start this conversation. But I must say, by doing, not only by talking, and then therefore I think it's a strong tool to start with a pilot, not to do only the pilot, also to make people, let's say, make them clear that things are on the road already, and to get them involved somehow. And I think this is a good preparation. At least I hope it boosts also a little bit the time until we can really scale here. Because it's a sign we need also to give from the market. And I'm here let's say, the part of the market of the logistic company. And I hope there are other companies in the logistic market, to come with a much more strong message that we believe in that and we want to have it. And I think at the end, this also helps, let's say, the OEMs and all the others to get prepared as well, to have things ready in the near future.
Thank you. Oliver, just on kind of a little bit alluding to what you said earlier about collaboration, but one of the major hurdles of AV adoption is creating a viable economic model that justifies a kind of transition from human-driven AI fleets rather to AV fleets. How can businesses and policy workers, I guess, work together to create a sustainable and economically viable model for AV adoption in logistics? Curious to hear your answer.
Yeah, it's a really important point, and I think it will take multiple organizations to sort of come together to deliver these, as you say, from the policy side to various different industry players, and it's also going to introduce new types of suppliers to this industry that haven't been involved in the automotive industry before. So Oxa, for example, is a type of organization that's not been a supplier to the automotive industry before. So I think there's many different things that can be supported on a policy level. So supporting the development of regulation is critical, and we've got the sort of the national regulation, which I've mentioned earlier, international regulation, which I mentioned earlier, being developed by the UN. But there'll also be sort of likely to be national requirements coming in as well to support the approval of these vehicles or authorization of these vehicles against sort of local traffic laws and local requirements there as well. So timely introduction of regulation is pretty critical for this, and sort of lays the foundation for this technology to be rolled out on the public road anyway. That's saying there's big opportunities in the off-highway market sort of immediately, and that the need is here now, and the technology is really here ready for that now as well. And that's one of the main things we're focusing here at Oxa is the industrial mobility automation. So how can we create automated solutions for very repeatable routes that are repeated day after day, and you can replace that driver with a robot to undertake that task, which can provide sort of safety benefits and economical benefits from reducing operational cost, improving efficiencies. And I think one area that governments can come and support that area as well is providing the incentives. Maybe that's financial incentives to get this technology out there and deployed sooner rather than later, because the benefits are quite widespread across sort of local economic benefits and also much more national, but also social benefits with this technology deployment as well.
Thank you, Oliver. Arwed, I turn to you about readiness, because Bjorn talked about readiness, and I think infrastructure is always like a big topic in the sector. And Europe's infrastructure will play a critical role in determining how quickly AVs can ultimately be integrated. So from your perspective, how ready is Europe's infrastructure for AV deployment, and what kind of critical developments do you think are still needed for large-scale deployment? And are there specific areas in which you see the most challenge out of all of them?
Let me talk first about financial readiness here.
Yeah.
Looking back to the past many years, pilots usually have a very high capex. You have to invest a lot for a specific hardware thing, plus a specific software topic. At the end, it's driven by time. So after a specific period of time, it's over, and at the end, it's depreciated within that time frame. Usually, especially when you look into goods transportation systems, it is over many years, a decade or even longer, that you can depreciate the vehicles. 15 years, 18 years, 20 years, trucking business. You want to drive them long. They are meant to stay long in their operation. This has to be achieved. So when we speak about infrastructure, it is not just a question about, is the network good enough? Do we need additional infrastructure from a sensor level and so on and so forth? It is also the question, is the readiness there from the market participants to have the arguments in their pocket for their own CFOs to declare that this not only makes sense from a technology point of view or from this specific use case point of view, but rather, again, the topic sustainability from the decade point of view, that you just embed it and you let it run as is, because it is not coming with childhood questions back to you, that you have every now and then something to do with the vehicle, because it simply is, from a product engineering point of view, not ready-made. And you have to cure this expensively with a client, should take a vehicle that just can do the job, and then do the hardware that is needed in terms of sensors and in terms of control instances and so on, and the software. And at the end, it can just run. And that is the case when you speak more generally about the infrastructure. On open road, I think we have seen in the past years, especially with the challenge we face as European OEM and Tier 1 industry, we have seen that the question on open road is still open, and I wouldn't give a clear view here. I think this is a very big question with not a good reply for today. But what I know is that all the confined areas which we have, where they have to have a good network, where they have to have very smart knowledge about what they can do and what they can't do, where they have very precise safety regulation in place. Oliver spoke a bit about machine directory, for instance, but that you have already knowledge about the safety case, that you do not need to come from scratch and build a safety case, but that you know what's happening and what's within and what's without. And for that, Europe is completely prepared. Because if you look at the airports, if you look at the seaports, if you look at the industrial sites, what Björn has in his portfolio of sites, they manage that today already. This is not unknown territory. This is very well-known territory. It is an engineered territory, so to speak. And to embed an automated solution into that one can work very well technically, plus financially, regarding the depreciation topic, what I said earlier. And going from that one, once this works in a scaled manner, to an open road when the regulation has a specific, let's call it maturity, in terms of that the regulation is not only seen as hurdle, but that it really helps also. This one is a second step. So this is why we made a big change on that. We had to prioritize again, and for now we focus on those confined areas. We focus on where things can be controlled and understood and done. And when this works, then you can expand. But the trials on open road, hoping for a specific regulation to come and matching exactly your own technology roadmap, this is quite dangerous, and this brings instability in the markets.
Thank you very much, Arwed. Karla, I'm going to just turn to you. A question on public trust, because this was also mentioned earlier. Public trust and acceptance are obviously essential for the success of autonomous vehicles. What role do you think organizations like TRL have in building public trust and acceptance of these technologies, particularly in like really complex environments like where SMLL is based, for example?
Yeah, and I think if you put it into reality, this will be the same across Europe. When you get into a taxi, you don't say to the taxi driver, can you just show me that you have passed a driving test and that this car is insured and it's passed what we have in the UK MOT, it's vehicle testing. You don't do that. You assume that that's all happened. We as public, we assume that somebody else is doing all of this testing to make sure it's safe. And a lot of us on this call today, we are those organizations who will be working with government behind the scenes to really try and ensure that that is happening, to provide that safety, to provide that confidence, and where necessary, doing investigations when things don't quite go right. So that's very much our role, where we can do that. To just give a bit more confidence. And I think that the more and more these vehicles are seen and they're out there and they're trusted, then, that public trust will, we hope, will follow. But there's always going to be skepticism. Unfortunately, when those first few accidents happen, as we know, they make the media. So, how can we learn from that and learn from some of the past experiences elsewhere in the world?
Thank you. That's a really great way to put it, actually. I never thought about that practically. I don't ask my taxi drivers for those things, so very, very much heard. Björn, Planzer's partnership with Loxo represents a regional first strategy for AV deployment, if you like, and has, I'm sure, provided some insights into the benefits of like more localized deployments. What advantages have you observed from this regional approach, and how does it compare to the challenges of scaling globally, if you like, which I think Arwed might have alluded to earlier?
Maybe let's shortly explain what we are doing in Bern with Loxo. Yeah. Company Loxo, a startup from Switzerland, developing software, and for us, they retrofitted also a ID bus we are using at the moment in Bern to deliver, let's say, exchangeable parcel boxes into the city. And what Karla mentioned, I really can it's true that the last meters are still challenging. So at least the goods we are transporting, they must be somewhere handed over to somebody. And this we overcome in our pilot in Bern by putting this kind of exchangeable parcel boxes to smaller cargo bikes. And then the delivery man, they use the cargo bikes to deliver at the end, at the last meters. And from the use case perspective, this gives us the chance to overcome this, let's say, non-productive way into the city, and at least use the cargo bikes in the city with their advantages, to be more flexible, to be more also, let's say, sustainable, let's say it from this side. And this we pilot, it's an ODD in total of 67 kilometers in Bern. And there we are operating currently. And regarding your question, I think for the moment, there is no other chance for us in Switzerland than going bottom up. So at least to find somebody who really believes in from the technology part, and to have somebody like us really can shape the use case. And this is this is very important here to say. So at the moment, if we talk about level 4 vehicles in logistic, it's at least we have less flexibility in using this kind of vehicles. When today we have a vehicle in the fleet, we can do everything we want. We can go on any street, we can transport everything we want. At least when we talk about an ODD, we need really to be sure what makes sense and how does the operations looks like and how we can earn money with that. And therefore, this gives us currently the chance to prove that, and also to bring the, let's say, cities from their perspective in the boat, to also see their advantages in not having more traffic. So we can prove at the moment that with this kind of, let's say, exchangeable parcel boxes, we can deliver more parcels into the city with one vehicle, because there at the end there is no driver's seat and so on. And these are all the things we can start to discuss and make people and public really understand the potential. And also what we realize at the moment is to give the regulation bodies, we maybe it's recorded, I know, but we at the moment educate them as well, because they are not the technology experts. And it's also something where we can prepare everybody, that at least they can say, now I understood. Okay, Planzer can say we earn money. The regulation bodies, they feel okay, it's safe. People, they trust what Karla mentioned. And then to go to the next steps, to go to the next city, to scale it, it's much more easier to come through this way. If we would come to, let's say, with a big plan of 500 vehicles, I believe at the moment there is no chance to start. Not even talking about the infrastructure Arwed was mentioning, because this we realize at the moment as well. It's not everywhere in any corner prepared for running in ODD, running in level 4 vehicle on an ODD. So we have an example for the connectivity, where it's not always reliable to have the connectivity we need to really monitor the vehicle at the end. So I think we are on the right track, but I think it must be also clear that this cannot happen for the next 5 years. To do pilots in this scale, we need to have we need to proceed fast. Let's say start small, think big, and proceed fast. Yeah.
I like that. I'll try and remember that for the end and quote you on that, Bjorn. Thank you. So I mean, you've all kind of said the role that regulation kind of plays in this. So I'll ask you all really. What do you think is the most significant regulatory challenge that's facing the logistics industry and goods transportation when it comes to attempting to scale AV operations? I can start with you, Bjorn, if you like.
Maybe I'm not an expert on that, but what we realize at the moment, it's also to give the responsibility to the right persons and bodies. And this is something we have since March this year. We have a new audience for automated driving in Switzerland. That's really cool. That gives us also the, let's say, the motivation to go ahead, because more or less the framework is there. But there are many question marks still. So the road owner at the end needs to give the permission, and the road owner is the canton. So what happens when we drive from one canton to the next? So this is, of course, in logistic happening every day. In Switzerland is quite small. Sometimes in 50 kilometers you drive through 3 cantons. So there are many things not yet clear, and I think this is something where we hope that this comes in a short term, that this is so far defined, and the one who needs at the end to decide if we can run with this kind of software and vehicle on this ODD, that they are really prepared soon to give us here the permission. Because under a pilot scenario, you are more or less flexible, but later under law, it's law, and then things must be sure that we can really go fast to get the permission.
Yeah. Arwed?
You like what Karla said regarding the taxi driver. Like, we try to use something in the same world. Take a horse. And first you train that the horse jumps over a meter and then 1.50 meters, and then maybe it can do the 180 or 2 meters. But if you ask the horse right away to do the 2 meters, it will just be frightened and run away. And in that logic, regulation, if I'm for over 10 years in this business in Europe, and I have seen that all the regulation was coming just with the best efforts, with good people trying to be there to protect, to prevent, and to do what regulation is meant to be for. What we realize today is that when you are in kind of a jungle of regulation for so many topics that have to be regulated, it's super tough to just make a lean way through that. It's a bit what I said with the horse. So what I would, and that's actually my political work to work on that, what I hope for is that after the last 5 years, especially here in Germany, you know, I'm sitting in Berlin, I witnessed all that discussion. I supported in the early days that there is a bold law for autonomous driving and that there is a specific regulation. And yes, it's true, the regulation is a beauty, and it would be so cool if this regulation is in place over and with the European Commission, but at the end, it doesn't allow for having a quick market entry, because everybody, like a horse, for the 2 meters would need to jump on the big thing. And the big thing here is the safety target. The big thing here is the braking momentum control. The big thing is how is your core level constructed that it can do the safety as requested, and so on and so forth. And instead of going that today, with all the last 10 years of experience, I would say it was wrong to ask the horse to have the first 2 meters, at first the 2 meters, but rather we should, for the next 5 years, find an integration plan into regulation and say, for the next 2 years, this paragraph is valid. It is soft, we know that, but it will allow that the market can start. And then we harden that. This is the next step. And then we harden that to have reached at a specific target date, 2032, I don't know, to have a specific level of, this is then the ready-made set for regulation for autonomous driving, but to have with an entry plan, and this is between real labs, this is between making exemptions at the moment and so on, but to find a path into that. And so I would, if I could advise back to the last 7 years, say, don't do that. Don't come with bold regulation first and tell everyone how it has to look like. Be cool, accept a bit that you won't fit exactly into everything, but allow to grow, and then, like a gardener, go at the end. It's a paradigm shift. 5 years ago, this question I would have told you, we need to have ISO 26262 compliance. It has to be ASIL D on all, because otherwise it won't work. It's right, from a pure safety argumentation, there is no way out of that. But it brings us into the situation where we stand today with this market. And we want that, again, I look at Björn, we want to have those complex use cases with so many etaps in between. We want to bring them into autonomy, and having so much regulation that none of the competitors in those markets can just, like the horse, jump over it, is preventing that the market is coming. And that is what shouldn't happen with regulation.
Thank you, Arwed. That was great. Karla?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of nodding because I completely agree with that, and I love the horse analogy as well, and I'm going to follow on from that. We're starting a theme here. So I would say that yes, there are some organizations who can jump a bit higher than others, and some they couldn't even jump 50 centimeters. You know, if we take this down again into practical levels, so if you think about the disparities in the supply chain when it comes to logistics, you've got your bigger players who might be able to jump a bit higher because they've got the finances, they've got the experts to tell them which data they need, how to do it, the implications if they do, they don't. But then you've got your much smaller businesses who've been around for a long time delivering vehicles, in their own, with their private vehicles, you know, your Jakeman and Sons who've got a little white van or maybe 10 vans, and it's been working fine. So why should they automate? Why break it? What happens if they don't? What happens if they do? How do they do it? Is that regulation clear? There's all of those questions around it. Who do they speak to? So I think we've almost got an obligation to support the entire supply chain, not just your bigger players, but your smaller ponies, donkeys, whatever, down the road who can't necessarily jump as high, because we need to be able to support them through organisations like PAVE Europe and the education piece and skilling them up. But we have an obligation really to make sure that those regulations are as fair and robust and not, what's the word? They're not meaning that certain people can't play in this game because of the regulations. We need to be as open and transparent as possible.
Thank you.
There's a real theme, isn't there, about practicalities here?
Like the most one-liners in PAVE Europe virtual panel history, I think. So yeah, we're going well. And to you, Oliver, please.
Thank you, Nicola. And I think there's some really good points that have been made. And yeah, developing regulation that is flexible and supports industry at its current point in time is really important. It's quite an immature industry still at the moment, and we can't bring in regulation that sets certain requirements that the industry is just not ready for, and we don't know if those requirements are appropriate yet, just because we haven't found that information out. But I think one sort of big difference between vehicle regulation historically and where we're moving into. Historically, it's all been quite black and white. So if you do these tests, you pass this bar, and then you get a rubber stamp, and you're good to go. We're moving to a world where regulation requires a lot more interpretation. So it uses words like appropriate distances. So you're going to have to define what you mean by an appropriate distance. And that's going to be very dependent on the sort of area you're going to be deploying in, so your operational design domain, and the types of service you're going to be operating. And the language is intentional because there's going to be so many different uses of this technology in so many different environments that it's not practical at the moment to set that black and white bar of this is a pass criteria. So it's going to require lots of interpretation. It's going to require sort of collaboration across all the different countries where you wish to deploy this technology as well, to ensure that interpretation is appropriate for the different deployment environments. So yeah, that's a brief comment from me about how I think this is changing compared to historic regulation for vehicles.
Nicola, before you go over, can I just add one single word to Oliver?
Please go ahead. Yes.
If you look back into those years of exemption permissions, without regulation, other regulation, and then you have to have exemption permissions, plus having pilots with short durations, partly below 1 year, what people see, because we are in a PAVE Europe panel, acceptance driven, what people see is there is something new, it looks a bit different. It is only there for a year or two, then it's taken away, and they know, oh, it was never compliant to the regulation. And if you just repeat that over years, it just doesn't bring anything but mistrust. So what you have to do exactly the same. There's the opposite. You have to bring vehicles where people can start adopting themselves into it. Okay, this is part of my daily life. Plus having it's in regulation. It is not the final regulation, but is in today's state of regulation that people can build their trust on. Okay, it is compliant, and I see it steadily. And these two factors bring up the acceptance.
Thank you for interrupting. That was great. If I'll stick with you, actually, Oliver. Oxa has been at the forefront of developing AV systems that operate along human-side driven vehicles. I think there's actually a question about this in the Q&A box as well. But what are the kind of most significant technical and operational challenges you think that arise when integrating autonomous and human operated vehicles in the same environment? Very fun question.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. I think how I see it is one of the biggest challenges is the thing that humans are actually very good at. It's the perceiving the environment in an accurate form. So the human eyes and the human mind is very good at identifying objects, identifying intent of those objects, and predicting trajectories of those objects, and that all helps us to navigate ourselves in the world and to maneuver vehicles in the world in a fairly safe way. I think humans are very good at doing that task. And that's sort of one of the bigger challenges that industries had to try and overcome, and lots of different tools are being used in artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve this, and capability in this space is always improving, so it's always going to be getting better. But the ability for machines to reliably perceive the world, understand what's in front of it, and predict the movement of objects is something that will keep on growing and developing. And one of the challenges with this is when you're integrating automated vehicles in an area where humans operate, is humans are inherently unpredictable. We do things that aren't just repeatable day after day. We always do things slightly differently. And trying to predict the movement of people is quite difficult. One way you can sort of we need to really develop our safety case and our evidence to show how safe we are, by doing a large range of testing and validating to ensure that in the area that we're deploying the vehicles in, we can safely sort of navigate everything that we're going to come in front of. And that's what we're going to come in front of in all the different sort of environmental conditions that may change as well. And testing and validating that in a physical environment through all those different variants is going to be very challenging, very time consuming, require a huge amount of costs, and it's largely sort of, just unrealistic. So something we've been working on quite extensively with Anoxa is our simulation tool set, and how we can take a scene in a scenario and then use machine learning to change that scenario, to change the weather, for example, into many different variants. So we'll have it could be an off-road environment. So we're operating in an airport, for example, and we take a scene from a real-world situation when it was sunny, and now we're going to make it rain. And can we now detect the objects in the scene in the same way and still safely and reliably when it's raining, and our sensors maybe are having to cope with that environment. So I think, from my perspective, that feels like one of the challenges that still exists. It's not sort of stopping deployment at the moment, but it's always going to be improving. And it really applies to off-highway and on-highway at different levels, but it applies to many different operational environments.
Thank you, Oliver. Arwed, what just on what Oliver was saying, what unique considerations, I guess, and operational challenges do you believe arise in these mixed operational settings, and how is EasyMile, for example, addressing these potential conflicts to ensure the safety and seamless operations?
As you all know, we put safety really first. So the way how we did develop our technology 10 years ago and continuously do that, it's driven by it would be too much to explore on that now in detail, but it's the safety is a core, and if it is needed to build individual safety cases, we do that. But the good news is, after all the many years of deployment and after understanding what we did, and we have a beautiful track record when it comes to safety, which is the result out of that, putting it first. At the end, if it is needed to make a new safety case, which is expensive, if we speak about price again, it costs you time, the assessment and so on. Ideally, you don't have to do it. Ideally, it's pure replicable to do it. But I think for the next years, it will be necessary to assess individually and make a safety case specifically, a threshold safety case, not like the, big world. But I don't see operational challenges in that what we're doing today. I see the operational challenge in, especially for the logistics case, to have a complete chain, that the product can be completed, the transportation chain can be completed in an automation manner from the fence, and this will be complex, and we will not see in the next 5 or 10 years that the entire chain from arriving at a seaport and being then distributed microgranular in a city, that the entire chain is autonomous. But I think, again, bold words, we don't need to see that. What we need to see is that on where it is possible today and in the next 5 or 10 years to do the specific job already profitable, that you just do this. Because this is how technology can be really substantially integrated and stays in that chain. And when you have the maturity and when the companies are there to allow for having, for instance, open road on an 80 kilometers or even 100 kilometers continuously over territorial borders with perfect network. And when we have this, maybe this is like the masterpiece, to put it, like the cherry on the cake. But I wouldn't aim and I wouldn't focus this discussion on this specific one single use case, because there are so many others which are so important as well and which are just doable today. And again, we are out of the years of the net funding distribution, and we're in the years of consolidating and understanding and putting a synthesis of the last years. And here we just need to focus on what is really doable today to just bring the market really forward.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to ask an audience question, which I think is maybe the most popular of questions, but here we go. What is still needed to reach level 4? We all think scaling is coming around 2030, but what are the critical points and what do we need to work on to reach level 4? Who would like to take a crack at that first? Bjorn, I'm going to look at you if that's okay.
I think at the moment we are a little bit in a dilemma. I think it's kind of an innovation dilemma, because if there is no market with demand, maybe there's also not the solution at the end that can solve the challenge of the market. So at least I see at the moment the most critical point that we are all talking about. We see the potential, we are thinking about use cases and business cases, but at the end did not get the product for it and did not get the, let's say, solution, also the environment for it. So the critical point, in my opinion, is that we are not able to let's put the point again, to collaborate together, to make one thing out of it. And I believe in that, if we are all sure about where are the blind spots and to look at the blind spot. And I'm totally with Arwed, not to think too big, to start with the use cases and prove the use cases and then come with the right technology. I think that's key. And we can already realize that some of the points we were thinking it makes sense, they doesn't make sense at the moment. But there are other points where we haven't even no thoughts up till now to put some kind of use cases into the market. There we believe it can make sense. And I think it needs really, it needs action. And when the action is there, and this must come, in my opinion, from the big logistic companies as well, because if you look to Europe, we are here in a panel, but there are not so many logistic companies at the moment that are really, let's say, in a matter of putting the hands in and make them dirty, really work on the topic. And I think that's really will change the whole situation. And then the solutions, the OEMs and all the others, and of course the software and the regulations and safety, they will follow. I think that's really key. If the market doesn't give the sign, then in 10 years we don't have any solution on the road.
Thank you, Bjorn. Karla?
I think it's a kind of chicken and egg situation, really, isn't it? Where we don't have the demand, we don't get the funding, we can't test, and go around in that circle. So the more we can demonstrate testing, the more we can test some of those use cases that have been mentioned, and there are so many different types of use case that we need to look at. The more that we can do those in real world environments, the more demand there will be, the more business cases that we can develop to get more private funding into the industry to get that demand. And that will all group, building on each of those steps will take us towards or closer to level 4. And I think without that kind of public and private funding, and without that acceptance, haven't got the demand that Björn was just talking about. And it doesn't matter how far we go, if there's no demand at the end, it was all for nothing. So how can we ensure that we've got that demand and bringing people along as we're going through it, which I think, to be fair, we are doing. I think, most people know a little bit about automated vehicles or driverless cars or whatever they call them. My mum will say cars that drive themselves. That's what my daughter works in. So whatever it's called, I think the more that we can do that to get people to understand that this is round the corner, will take us closer and closer towards that level 4. But it's creating that demand both from a end user point of view, but also within the technologies, to get different people to provide different technologies to enable the overall technology to take it to that level.
Thank you, Karla. We're nearly running out of time, so I want to kind of press you on one single question, all of you. In only a sentence, if you were to answer, how do we unlock the potential of autonomous vehicles in goods, transportation, and logistics? What would the answer be? I'll start with you, Oliver, please.
I think it really builds on what we've really been saying just then, and market demand is a really key one, and public understanding or general understanding. But I think we shouldn't forget that it's here now for off-highway applications. The demand is there and the technology is there for off-highway applications, and here in Oxford we're doing that now as well. So we shouldn't forget that that's happening, and it will help us learn things for on-highway applications as well.
Thank you. Arwed, please.
I started EasyMile as a pre-sales engineer, focusing on 4 dimensions always: financial dimension, technology dimension, operational dimension, legal dimension. And when these 4 were matched and with a checkbox, then the project was good. And I would say this is true for the entire market. This is true when you put legal as regulation, when you put operational aspects at what Björn has, when you put technology as what the ODD has and what the level 4 has to deliver. If we, together with PAVE Europe, with the entities in the PAVE Europe, if we manage to bring these 4 dimensions in compliance with green checkboxes, we make a level 4 market.
Thank you. Karla, I'll turn to you.
I think, yeah, bring in all of those things together, really. So the more we can do this, the more we can take it forward. I'm going to keep it short because I know you've got nearly finished. But I think that the more we can do that and take people along and make this as encompassing for everybody along that supply chain, the further we'll get with this.
Thank you. And Björn, please.
I think it needs more storytelling for logistics. So it's not so common and not so sexy maybe than the public people transport. But I think something we are doing now here is very important to talk about logistics, to make it touchable, and to tell stories about what is possible in logistics. And then I think it will happen.
Short and sweet. I like that. We are at the end of the virtual panel, unfortunately. I think the virtual panel's main objective was to understand how AVs can unlock new potential in goods, transportation, and logistics. After listening to you all, firstly, I have a lot of one-liners that I'm very excited to collate and see how much we said today. But I think, while significant challenges may remain, I think, as Björn said really early on, actually, the momentum is here, and it's just about kind of taking the action and working together collaboratively as much as possible to tell the story of logistics. So that's going to be my main takeaway for the panel. I would encourage you all to download and read the paper that we've just released, so the case for autonomous vehicles in goods, transportation, and logistics. It is available on the PAVE Europe website and was authored by Rebecca Marsden and Natalie Tier. I'd like to thank our panelists, Arwed, Karla, Björn, and Oliver. Thank you so much for joining me today and for your insights. It's been a very great conversation, so thank you very much. Thank you to our audience for joining us today. The recording for this will be available in the upcoming days on the PAVE Europe website and YouTube channel. So thank you again. Have a great afternoon, and thank you and goodbye.